March 1945, Denmark. The train wasn't supposed to stop. No one expected a handful of civilians to challenge an entire Reich convoy loaded with gold and protected by elite SS patrols. That icy night, as the armored train thundered through Denmark's frozen landscape, whispers of an impossible mission began to surface. A plan so forbidden even Allied intelligence hesitated to support it. For years, Denmark lay dormant under occupation, its people forced into silence by fear and starvation. Nazi guards patrolled every street. The Gestapo hunted traitors, and ordinary families lived in dread of midnight knocks. But beneath the surface, courage flickered. In a cramped rail yard north of Copenhagen, 6 unlikely conspirators, led by a silent station worker named Erik, began to believe that the right kind of risk could change everything. Erik wasn't born a hero. Known for fading into the background, he watched the schedules, mapped Nazi patrol movements, and brokered coded deals with shifty railway clerks. His cell was a patchwork force. Anna, quiet but fierce, forged travel passes at her kitchen table. Klaus, haunted by loss, read sabotage guides and tracked patrol routes by candlelight. Mikkel, young and anxious, built explosives from discarded farm tools and whispered plans to live, whose nerves and nimble fingers moved coded signals faster than any radio. Jens kept watch by the basement window, waiting with trembling hands for orders sent in static from London. It began with rumor. Word spread that Reich officers were organizing a secret train, not for military reinforcements, but for moving stolen Nazi gold out of Denmark before the Allies cut the last escape route. The train, ironclad, armed, and set to move at midnight, was designed to be uncatchable. But Erik saw a flaw. If the resistance could predict its stop, fake a detour, and jam communications, perhaps they could intercept the Reich's fortune and send shockwaves through occupied Europe. The planning was relentless. Anna's papers bought precious seconds at checkpoints. Klaus mapped every blind spot on the rails from Copenhagen to Kværndrup, searching for lines where the train would slow, vulnerable for a split second. Mikkel scavenged detonators and greased tools, praying they'd work under pressure. Liv pressed her face against attic glass, memorizing Nazi signals. Jens practiced radio sabotage at dawn, jamming Gestapo frequencies on battered Allied equipment. Fear stalked every moment. The Gestapo's reach grew ruthless. Informers bribed for a sack of potatoes, patrols sweeping cellars at random, coded letters intercepted and used to hunt more resistors. Families kept suitcases ready for escape. Yet, something shifted in those perilous days. Each new brutality made Erik's mission more urgent, more necessary. On the eve of the operation, the cell gathered in silence. Anna wrote goodbye letters she hoped no one would have to deliver. Klaus inspected revolvers once hidden in flour sacks. Mikkel hid grenades in his work boots. Liv tucked a lucky coin into her scarf, holding it hard enough to mark her palm. Jens calibrated the radio, whispering the RAF code word for ready. Outside, the train's whistle pierced the city's darkness. Hundreds of gold bars, guarded, destined for Berlin. At 23:04, Erik gave his signal. The group melted into the icy streets under the cover of blackout curtains and sirens, blending with night workers and railway crews. The forbidden plan, rejected by most Allied officers, was now alive, built not on strength but on precision, deception, and courage born of desperation. The armored train approached the Kværndrup junction, never suspecting that 6 Danes, armed with homemade sabotage tools and stolen documents, would make history. As the wheels rattled past lifeless farmhouses, Denmark waited. In hidden rooms, families listened for explosions instead of church bells. Shopkeepers watched the darkness for coded lanterns, praying for something, anything, to prove the Nazis weren't invincible. In those frozen minutes, Erik's cell stepped out of anonymity and into the legend of a forbidden hijack no one ever expected would succeed. The train's echo faded as Eric's cell dissolved into the frigid Danish night. Each member slipped into position, hearts pounding, eyes scouring the shadows for signs of danger. Kværndrup Station loomed ahead, a forgotten waypoint on the Reich's treasure route, now a stage for Denmark's most forbidden plan. Anna blended with rail staff, her forged pass tucked inside her sleeve. Klaus timed each step with the rhythm of distant wheels, knowing there was no backup. Mikkel, pale and focused, gripped a coil of wire and detonators scavenged weeks before. Liv moved with practiced discretion among civilian workers, eyes scanning for SS insignia, while Jens hunched over a battered radio, tuning frequencies, listening for threats from Gestapo patrols. Overhead, blackout curtains muffled city lights. Nazi vehicles lurked along the road, engines idling, impatient, sure of themselves. The gold train slowed for only an instant, as Eric predicted, its armored cars groaning against the rails. That moment spelled the difference between triumph and catastrophe. Anna's forged paperwork unlocked vital seconds. She distracted 2 German guards with a staged confusion about cargo manifests. Klaus, hidden behind a maintenance shed, adjusted switching levers just as the train arrived, rerouting it to the slowest possible siding. Beyond standard SS patrol patterns, Mikkel crawled under supply wagons, fighting numbing fear with mechanical routine as he wired explosives to the weakest coupling. Liv signaled with her scarf, flicking it across a lantern-lit window exactly twice. The cell's silent code for clear. Jens jammed the local radio band, drowning Gestapo chatter in static. Inside the armored train, SS officers sensed nothing. Their focus was on their cargo and their superiors in Berlin, not on a handful of resistors they considered irrelevant. Danish railway workers, sworn to secrecy, caught glimpses of the clandestine action. One later described it as the moment when ordinary faces became legends. The cell's gamble was set in motion. Eric coordinated by sight and signal, moving quickly to anticipate every contingency. He and Klaus double-checked escape routes into nearby barns and drainage tunnels. These were mapped and rehearsed in secret for weeks. Anna, once the distraction was complete, joined Liv near the rear car, pressing herself into shadows. Mikkel's final connections triggered the timed detonation sequence. Jens relayed one last encrypted message. Thunder begins. For 2 silent minutes, nothing happened. The train idled, soldiers annoyed by unexplained delays, and Danish civilians half-believing rumor had outpaced reality. Then, at 23:09, Mikkel's device split the night with a harsh snap just under the supply car, loud enough to scatter guards and disrupt orders. Klaus unlatched a concealed side door as panic spread, yanking open the gold car's access hatch, while Anna and Liv cleared path for loading. Chaos erupted up and down the siding. SS men fired blindly into darkness, convinced an Allied air raid was imminent. Jens broadcast false orders into the Gestapo frequency, sending patrols away from the station. In the confusion, the forbidden cell moved with disciplined urgency. Gold bars, so heavy only 2 at a time could be managed, were loaded into a stolen maintenance van hidden by Eric and Klaus hours before. Anna watched the seconds tick by, counting only what could be carried, every bar worth a fortune and a future. Outside, the city's pulse quickened. Farmers shifted lantern positions. A county shopkeeper scribbled coded news to nearby resistance cells, while children listened for thunder on the horizon. This was more than a heist. It was hope manifest in real time. The train's survivors regrouped, but by then the forbidden cell had vanished. No trace but twisted rails and empty crates. As dawn inched toward the horizon, Eric's group sped off into the fog, carrying what the Nazis never expected to lose. Rumors of their feat would spread through Denmark by sunrise. whispered from market stalls to factory floors, embroidered in memory as proof that courage sometimes finds shape in the least expected places. In those final minutes, Denmark awakened not only to the sound of an explosion, but to an idea that forbidden plans, the ones never truly sanctioned, might be the very thing that turned history's tide. Denmark's quiet defiance during World War II was rooted in a culture of resilience and underlying tension. When Nazi forces invaded on April 9, 1940, the Danish government surrendered within hours, believing compliance would spare the nation destruction. The king remained, but power shifted rapidly. German authorities dictated daily life from Berlin, controlling food supply, restricting movement, and censoring newspapers that once carried tales of Danish freedom. In those early months, most Danish families clung to routine, hoping occupation might pass them by. But hope quickly soured. The Reich's grip tightened, banning political meetings, sending Gestapo agents into Copenhagen and Aarhus, and using Danish industry for Nazi war needs. Nazi gold shipments became a whisper among railway workers. Bar gossip, rumors passed in letters, and coded signals by lantern. Denmark, famed for its intricate rail network, now became the artery for Reich plunder. Gold, art, and precious cargo shipped under heavy guard. Always at night, always in secrecy. Despite harsh repression, resistance blossomed in unlikely places. Teachers quietly dismissed Nazi propaganda, students organized underground newspapers, and church leaders preached courage as occupation dragged on. By 1942, isolated sabotage acts turned into organized defiance. Railway workers passed warnings, sabotaged tracks, and helped Jewish families escape sudden raids. Every act, no matter how small, was charged with risk. Betrayal carried grave consequences. The British RAF took keen interest in Denmark's underground. Secret codes bounced through radios, while Allied operatives landed at remote beaches to coordinate with resistors. Eric, the cell's leader, first encountered British signals in 1944, learning the language of sabotage and survival. The aim? Disrupt German supply lines, gather intelligence, and, when rumor of a gold train reached resistance ears, prepare for audacious action. German authorities, frustrated by Danish stubbornness, increased surveillance. Informers multiplied, offering information for protection or food. Trusted neighbors disappeared overnight, never returning from Gestapo cells in the city. Martial law came in 1943, triggering mass arrests and pushing entire communities underground. Yet even this didn't break Danish resolve. Instead, the challenge grew. Every window glowing with coded lanterns, every quiet handshake, every smuggled Allied radio battery adding pressure to the Nazi machine. Gold, as both symbol and resource, carried heavy significance. The Nazi economic collapse meant every ounce was counted. Plundered from foreign banks, museums, and homes, shipped on armored trains toward Berlin. Danish workers, forced to load crates, risked all by slipping notes to resistance cells. Train schedules, numbers of armed guards, and secret hand signals passed from street to street. For them, sabotage wasn't only rebellion, it was survival for Denmark's dignity. Throughout 1944 and 1945, the stakes grew higher. Allied victories in France and the Soviet advance pressured German command. Rumors spread of frantic Reich efforts to relocate gold and artwork before defeat, using Danish railways as escape routes. Resistance cells like Eric's intercepted these whispers, knowing one successful hijack could devastate Nazi morale and offer a lifeline to occupied communities. In cold attic spaces and candle-lit cellars, the forbidden plan took shape. Anna forged travel passes. Klaus mapped SS patrol rotations. Mikkel scavenged explosives from farm equipment. Liv memorized lantern codes, and Jens recorded RAF frequencies. The entire country seemed to hold its breath, knowing one misstep would mean disaster. Yet, for every setback, 10 new acts of courage emerged, a testament to Denmark's enduring spirit. By March 1945, Denmark was a nation divided between terror and hope, waiting as the forbidden cell prepared to down the gold train. 6 ordinary Danes, united by secret resolve, carried the promise of resistance forward, proof that even among occupation's shadows, history's impossible missions sometimes found their heroes. By 1945, Denmark was no longer just occupied. It had become a crucible for ingenuity and risk. Each day brought fresh signs that both hope and danger could be found anywhere. In a baker's coded conversation, a shopkeeper's discreet warning, or a lantern positioned in a farmhouse window. The forbidden cell, Eric's group of 6, drew their strength from the silent network of resistance threaded throughout Danish towns and villages. Small victories had kept morale alive amid growing terror. When Jews were targeted for deportation, fishermen and farmers organized secret crossings to Sweden, risking everything for strangers. Teachers found ways to guide students toward critical thought, even as Nazi inspectors policed schoolrooms. Politicians hid correspondence, while artists embedded resistance messages in music and murals. There was never one unified front, but everywhere, pockets of courage grew behind acts of defiance. The gold train, carrying loot stripped from banks and museums across Europe, was the stuff of legend, its existence debated with equal parts awe and suspicion. Eric's cell became obsessed with the train's details. The timetable, armored cars, guns on board, the names of German officers assigned to oversee the cargo. Each fragment, painstakingly gathered, transformed into pieces of a forbidden blueprint. Anna risked detection at offices where railway codes were stored. Klaus established connections with sympathetic staff willing to sabotage signals. Mikkel scavenged bomb parts from abandoned farm machinery. Liv learned SS shift changes by observing patterns, and Jens waited for RAF radio confirmation. German retaliation grew more ruthless as defeat approached. Mass arrests swept the cities. Informers were rewarded with food and protection. Martial law meant random searches and blockades. The Gestapo's shadow stretched into every neighborhood. Yet, for every loss, the resistance adapted, devising new codes and hiding places, organizing supply runs by bicycle or boat. Their movement was fragile but persistent, powered by the knowledge that a single success could shift the occupation's balance. The Allies intensified their support, sending agents with forged identities to coordinate operations and deliver equipment. Shortwave radios crackled with instructions for sabotage and with coded news about changing front lines. The forbidden cell received messages from London. Never elaborate, always measured. Improvise. Delay the gold. Risk accepted. History will notice. Danish resistors transformed fear into action, knowing that any day could be their last. Plans were rehearsed in darkness, over bread and bitter coffee, in rooms lined with escape maps and hidden revolvers. Every setback, failed sabotage, a friend's arrest, a coded note intercepted, only hardened the cell's resolve. Eric's team mapped every inch of Kværndrup and nearby crossings, identifying places to hide and paths for escape. Anna purchased fabric and ink, generating passes for the entire group, each stamped with forged signatures that would survive superficial inspection. Klaus tracked SS supply movements, guessing the best diversion spots, while Mikkel traded for explosives meant only for railway workers. Liv organized lookout shifts. Jens stayed in touch with Allied contacts. The night before their mission, Denmark trembled. Railway workers whispered coded farewells to absent wives. Shopkeepers swept laneways, waiting for news no radio broadcast would confirm. Farmers moved lanterns to mark safe passage for resistors. Every household watched the sky, listening for something, anything, that could become a historic echo. The Nazi gold train embodied more than loot. It represented hope stolen, dignity lost, vengeance sought by the Reich. Denmark's forbidden cell, with no more than a handful of tools, improvised courage, and the backing of a country praying for deliverance, prepared to defy the impossible. It wasn't just about riches or resistance. It was about reclaiming fate from occupation's shadow. When the train finally slowed at Kværndrup, the world would hold its breath, even as history made its quiet turn in an empty Danish night. Night surrounded Kværndrup station, the sort of darkness that distorts sound and sharpens fear. For Eric's cell, conflict wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a drawn-out tension that began the moment Anna stepped onto the icy platform, her fake railway badge burning against her chest. The armored Nazi train, loaded with gold bars and flanked by SS sentries in long coats, crawled forward, its presence uneasy but undeniable. Each member wrestled personal demons as the forbidden plan entered its most critical stage. Anna fought the urge to run, forcing herself to lead the bluff. The first line of defense, if anything, went wrong. Klaus, concealed behind a heap of coal, clung to memory. Glimpses of past friends who'd vanished, lessons learned from failed sabotage runs. Liv scanned patrol routes, timing the distraction and escape signals down to the half-second, while Mikkel prayed the cold wouldn't numb his agile hands as he rigged supply car couplings for detonation. Jens, secluded beneath the old telegraph pole, monitored Gestapo transmissions, every burst of static a possible sign that their ruse had snapped. The train's escort outnumbered the cell tenfold. SS officers hustled passengers off the platform, searching for strays. Danish railway staff, nervous, darted glances toward Anna but said nothing, their silence both blessing and curse. Conflict didn't let up. It pressed harder as Eric watched the minutes slip by. Delay too long and reinforcements would arrive. Rush the plan and someone might be caught before the gold was in reach. The group's first obstacle arrived just after midnight. An SS inspector demanded Anna's papers. Her forged documents passed inspection, but the officer lingered, suspicious. Klaus kept his hand close to the revolver, ready for the smallest signal. 3 Nazi patrolmen paced toward Liv's position, their boots echoing against stone. Liv recited her alibi under her breath. She'd memorized every possible response, hoping none would be needed. Mikkel's detonation gear nearly snagged on loose gravel. Sweat stung his eyes, but he forced steady fingers to finish rigging the last explosive. Nearby, Klaus adjusted railway switches, creating a false track alignment that would buy the cell precious extra minutes. That single action changed everything. The train's crew fumbled with signals, distracted long enough for Anna to slip past the inspector and nod to Liv. Ready. Jens jammed the local communications, sending static across Gestapo radios just as alarms sounded nearby. 2 rail workers, quietly allied with the resistance, blocked a Nazi patrol's direct route to the train, inventing an emergency piping repair. This improvisation fed the cell more time, conflict unfolding not just with SS sentries, but with the very rhythm of the operation itself. Eric moved silently, monitoring every exchange. If the cell failed, it would mean not only execution, but the unraveling of resistance across 3 provinces. Tension peaked as Anna reached the final checkpoint, facing another German officer, this one less willing to accept paperwork. Liv signaled emergency. Klaus flashed a lantern, distracting the officer with news of a fire behind the freight shed. The cell had to adapt instantly. One misstep, and the entire plan would collapse. Mikkel slid beneath the train, finishing the wiring with seconds to spare. Klaus ducked behind a crate, ready to create another diversion if cornered. Liv passed Anna the code phrase to reset her cover, and Jens relayed a final message to the RAF. Obstacle overcome. Proceed. The resistance relied not just on muscle or explosives, but on the choreography of courage, timing, and split-second improvisation. Strain radiated from every action. Conflict here was quiet. A flash of suspicion, a pause too long, a glance that could destroy everything. But for Eric's cell, these battles were a test of both faith and ingenuity. In the final moments before everything changed, each member embraced the possibility of failure, forging it into something stronger. The will to push through, to defy all odds, and enact a forbidden hijack that would send Denmark's name echoing through the war's last chapters. The seconds after the coded signal felt stretched and surreal. Kværndrup Station, a place of ordinary routines, was now a pressure cooker, every sound amplified, every shadow menacing. Anna's heart threatened to give her away as she made her way past the suspicious German officer, forced confidence masking the terror beneath. Klaus, still hidden, watched for the flicker of lantern light. Leaves confirmation that the distractions were working. Outside, Nazi patrols doubled back, growing more impatient and aggressive, forcing the forbidden cell to adapt in the moment. Jens, huddled by his radio set beyond the rail yard, fought to maintain broadcast interference. Static filled the Gestapo frequencies, frustrated reminders for patrols to check identification and account for any unusual behavior. The resistance plan was a dance with disaster. One wrong move would have the whole cell rounded up before they reached the gold. Anna, catching Liv's glance, maneuvered closer to the armored car, feigning concern over a misplaced document. The officer finally let her pass, but his eyes lingered. A missed detail could have led to disaster. Pressure built on every front. SS soldiers barked orders for civilians to clear the platform, and Anna did as told, vanishing into the swirl of railway staff and smoke. Liv's nerves were steel. She slipped beneath a lamplight, drawing the eyes of one patrol with a staged limp, drawing suspicion away from Mikkel and his final preparations. Mikkel pressed himself into the train's underbelly, fighting panic as he heard boots on gravel just meters above. He finished the detonation sequence, then squeezed free, heart pounding, hoping his absence wouldn't be noticed when the guard returned. Klaus, feeling time running out, reached for his pocketed revolver as two German officers turned unexpectedly toward his hiding spot. Inches from being discovered, his instincts screamed for escape, but he stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. The officers, distracted by shouts from the distant station gate, turned back. Liv signaled again, sequence ready. Eric, keeping watch, coordinated their next steps with subtle gestures honed from months of dangerous practice. Meanwhile, Nazis inside the train grew suspicious. An officer radioed for a routine check. Jens jammed the transmission, sending static and false echoes down the line. Anna joined Liv behind the supply depot, both straining to catch every sound from the platform. They were nearly out of time. Any delay risked colliding with another patrol. A sure disaster. The conflict wasn't just with Nazis. It was with luck, timing, and sheer nerves. Just as the last car was loaded, a startled German discovered fresh footprints near the forbidden area. The officer called for a search and tension erupted. Klaus fired a crucial distraction shot, a single crack that sent guards dashing in the wrong direction. Anna and Liv ducked behind tool bins, nearly trapped by boots crunching past the crates. Mikkel set off the first controlled charge, an ear-splitting bang that snapped the night and masked movement, sending smoke and confusion tumbling across the yard. Eric seized the moment, ushering the others toward the loading bay. In the chaos, gold bars clanged against toolboxes, and the small van stashed nearby groaned under the weight of a fortune. Liv radioed the code, nightfall complete, to Jens, who relayed news to British contacts. The impossible was happening, but escape was not guaranteed. Shots rang out in the chaos. Searchlights swept the rail yard, illuminating shadows with painful clarity. Liv and Anna crawled beneath wagons, scraping knees on the gravel, while Mikkel guided Klaus across fallen barrels. Jens, now on the move, kept the jamming going with shaking hands. Nazi officers, disoriented, shouted in German, convinced they were under attack from a larger Allied force. At the edge of Kverndrup, the cell regrouped. The gold train lost. Danish courage victorious for a single, fragile night. The conflict, relentless and terrifying, hadn't ended. As they peeled away in the battered maintenance van, uncertainty followed. Behind them, the gold-laden armored train stood crippled, and Nazi command in Denmark woke to the stunning reality. A forbidden hijack had shaken the Reich's last defense, with 6 ordinary Danes changed into symbols for every resistor hiding in the occupation's shadow. Kverndrup station lay ruined in the chaos, its lamps shattered, echoing bomb blasts and shouts cutting through the night. The Forbidden Cell's moment, the main event, had begun not with heroics, but with desperate, synchronized action. As Nazi guards scrambled, blinded by smoke and confusion, Eric led the way, his calm hiding panic as shots snapped past overhead. Anna and Liv darted into the open, loaded tool bins and crates in record time. Gold bars, heavy, cold, and unmistakable, passed from trembling hands to the battered van, wrapped hastily in railway blankets and workers' coats. Klaus, bloodied from a sharp fall, gripped the revolver and scanned the yard for movement, alert to the risk that more SS reinforcements would arrive any second. Mikkel joined Anna, heaving precious cargo, adrenaline masking every pain and doubt. Jens, sprinting between hiding places, kept his radio jammer alive, ensuring the Gestapo didn't summon backup through their main channels. The train hissed and groaned, its engines still vulnerable. Mikkel crawled back, planting a second, larger device beneath the gold car's wheel assembly. A final act to prevent pursuit. The explosion was controlled but potent, derailing the armored section and pinning it against the siding. Scattered Nazi guards fired into the darkness, convinced they faced a battalion instead of 6 determined civilians. Eric's leadership was the glue binding the cell together. He directed movement with sharp gestures, prioritizing speed over caution. Anna counted bars, Liv kept watch for approaching headlights on the main road. Klaus helped Mikkel drag a wounded rail worker to safety. Jens fed static bursts into his transmitter, simulating fake Allied instructions that sowed more panic among Nazi officers. Time was a weapon, and the cell fought against its passage with every trick and tactic learned over months in Denmark's shadowy underground. The van's engine coughed and threatened failure, but Eric coaxed life into it, the only escape route loaded with gold and 6 lives at stake. Anna handed Liv a torn strip of map marking the backup rendezvous in case separation became inevitable. Nazi reinforcements arrived late, stumbling into a rail yard transformed into a battlefield. They found only confusion, gold bars missing, tracks sabotaged, their own officers radioing for help in vain. Danish civilians, drawn to the racket, peered in terror from alleys and attic windows. Some slipped the cell-coded signals, flashes of lantern, rapid knocks against doors, giving updates on SS movement and local patrols. The cell's escape was as cinematic as its assault. The van rattled out of Kverndrup just as searchlights swept the station. Eric navigated dark, winding roads. Anna plotted alternate routes from memory. Klaus covered rear windows with a curtain. Liv monitored radio chatter on a battered headset. And Mikkel kept tense watch for roadblocks. Jens sent out fake distress signals on the railway band, masking the van's route behind layers of static. Every kilometer away from the station increased their risk of discovery. Patrols set up checkpoints. Nazi officers interrogated railway workers, searching for weaknesses in cover stories. Anna supplied convincing lies. Tool delivery, emergency repairs, critical supplies for Copenhagen. Klaus used his local knowledge to divert attention, recommending detours through barely used tracks. Liv hid coded documents in a neighboring barn as a fallback. Mikkel retrieved backup explosives, ready to destroy evidence if capture seemed certain. Jens relayed news to the British contact. Gold moved, pursuing escape. Far from the cell's van, ordinary Danes whispered the story. The forbidden hijack rippled through communities. 6 Danish workers humiliated the Reich. Gold lost in midnight chaos. Some feared reprisals. Others claimed hope. Eric's cell didn't have time to celebrate. Their survival depended on the next hours. Their every move a calculated gamble. The armored train, once a symbol of Nazi dominance, lay broken amid rail debris and scattered commands. Its fortune vanished. Its legend sealed by 6 civilians whose faces would remain hidden to Gestapo and history alike. The cell pressed on into darkness, a handful of gold bars and Denmark's future riding in the battered van, chased only by rumor and the echo of forbidden success. Denmark's frost-bitten backroads became a crucible for the forbidden cell as they fled the chaos at Kværndrup. The battered van bounced over potholes, the weight of stolen gold compounding the strain on every tire and axle. Each jolt brought a new chorus of desperate hope. Would the engine hold? Would roadblocks catch them? How long before the Reich realized what was lost? For Eric, every kilometer pushed them deeper into legend and peril. Inside the van, tension thickened. Anna fought to steady her breathing, eyes darting between the windows and her hastily sketched escape plan. Liv muffled the gold's metallic clinks with coarse blankets, whispering encouragement to herself as another headlight beam flashed across their path. Klaus gripped his revolver, forehead pressed against cold glass. Each distant siren or shout forced his finger tighter on the trigger. Mikkel, sweating but resolute, checked and rechecked bundles, ensuring nothing was left behind or exposed. Jens maintained furious contact with the RAF, relaying new positions and requesting the planned air distraction, the only chance if they were cornered. Every turn carried the risk of catastrophe. Nazi patrols had already locked down main roads and bridges leading east. Villages set to wake that morning would find columns of soldiers, search dogs, and interrogators combing the fields. Anna memorized faces at each crossing, wary of spies or informers. Klaus, local to the countryside, chose a muddy forest trail, gambling on his knowledge of forgotten farm lanes. Mikkel watched the odometer as if counting heartbeats, calculating the distance to their safe house. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared in the rear-view mirror. Too bright, too persistent to be civilian. Liv stiffened. "SS Scout," she whispered. Eric drove with careful speed, avoiding panic but veering off toward a thick stand of trees. The van's tires slid, mud splattering the windshield. Anna prayed the tracks would disappear beneath fresh snow. Klaus signaled for silence. Everyone pressed themselves low, holding their breaths as an enemy jeep idled nearby, engines sputtering, searchlights stabbing into the forest. The cell passed a crucible of nerves, minutes that felt like days. The SS Scout car, failing to spot tracks, sped away, its siren dying in the distance. Eric started the engine once more. The van slipped through the forest like a ghost. The reprieve was brief. Soon, news of the gold train disaster rocketed across Nazi channels. Sabotage at Kværndrup. Secure all exits. Arrest all rail staff. The pressure was unrelenting. Jens sent their location to the RAF. Divert. Now or never. Relief swelled as Allied planes appeared overhead, thundering low in the dawn sky. Spotlights and sirens throughout the region jerked upward, Nazi troops scrambling to address the imminent air raid. The distraction, risky, costly, and never guaranteed, was now the cell's salvation. Eric floored the van along a deserted farm road, heading for a barn arranged by the resistance network days earlier. Arrival was frantic and precise. Anna and Mikkel hustled gold bars into a prepared crate, disguising it among milk cans bound for Sweden. Klaus swapped license plates on the van. Liv spread false tracks toward another village. Jens burned compromised documents. The whole operation was a lesson in improvisation, every act a wager that history would remember courage more than failure. Behind them, Kværndrup lay blanketed by confusion and fury. SS interrogators detained local workers, searching for clues and scapegoats. Railway managers, terrified, disavowed knowledge. The region's resistance cells prepared for the worst. Reprisals, raids, perhaps even executions. The legend of the forbidden hijack twisted with each retelling. Some called it an Allied plot. Others insisted on Danish ingenuity. The 6 vanished like smoke. Each went to ground. Anna hid as a factory worker. Klaus found refuge on a remote farm. Mikkel posed as a wandering laborer. Liv vanished into a fishing family near the coast. Jens and Erik maintained the last lines to Allied contacts, passing coded word that the mission had succeeded, that the Reich's hoarded gold was out of Hitler's grasp. For days, the countryside buzzed with rumor and hope. The Nazis never recaptured the van, and though reprisals were cruel, the Forbidden Cell's victory became something greater than a crime or conquest. It became a myth, a proof that even under occupation, small acts of organized courage could alter the fate of nations. As sunrise bled through Denmark, the forbidden hijack sent shockwaves across the occupied nation. The Nazi gold train, engine disabled, guards scattered, fortune missing, became the stuff of terror, rumor, and hope. Local resistance cells scrambled to learn the full story. In tight circles, the legend spread. Erik's group did it. The impossible. The news didn't appear in newspapers, but it echoed in market stalls, whispered by vendors and milkmen risking their lives to pass truth. Nazi command responded with cold fury. Martial law snapped tighter, checkpoints multiplied, and SS units raided rail stations and safe houses without warning. In Copenhagen, Gestapo teams interrogated railway staff overnight. Every den, every crumpled paper, was evidence to be crushed. Despite all this, not a single gold bar returned to the Reich. Detailed manifests showed the cell had extracted almost a ton of Nazi gold and valuables, enough to fund the resistance for months, and enough humiliation for the occupiers to consider drastic action. Danish communities reacted with a blend of awe and caution. The cell's operation, so precise it bordered on audacious, became a beacon of courage. Secret meetings in barns offered thanks, coded letters passed along rural post routes, and allies swore oaths to carry the mission's flame, knowing retribution would follow. The Forbidden Cell's names were sacred secrets, shared only among trusted resistance leaders. Each member vanished into false identities, guided by local networks, an unbroken chain now feeding life into Denmark's wounded dignity. The British RAF, receiving coded reports through Jens, signaled open praise. Messages from London promised extra supplies and support. Mission confirmed. Your bravery noted. Allied broadcasts made veiled references to the shocking sabotage north of Copenhagen without naming specifics, hinting that the forbidden plan had left its mark far beyond Danish shores. Resistance cells abroad asked for guidance. How had a handful defied Nazi patrols so spectacularly? Erik's answers, sent in careful code, laid out the essentials: precision, teamwork, and courage against unthinkable odds. The gold itself became a lifeline. Anna and Mikkel, with help from local farmers, distributed resources across the underground: food, medical supplies, forged papers, and newsprint, tools for defiance that would never have reached thousands without the cell's coup. Families of lost resistance fighters received silent gifts that spelled hope for recovery. not just survival. Klaus worked to move the remaining bars farther north, routing them through fishing routes to Sweden, where exiled Danes and Allied contacts waited. Yet the aftermath thrummed with danger. Nazi officers, desperate to regain control, detained hundreds. Some Danish collaborators turned informers, hoping to buy reprieve from crackdowns. Liv narrowly escaped arrest in a port town, shielded by a sympathetic merchant who insisted she was his niece. Jens faded into obscurity, his radio silence masking a feverish relay of resistance plans from hiding. Ordinary Danes found new purpose. Shopkeepers coded prices, teachers reworded lessons to memorialize the hijack, and even children mimicked forbidden signals in backyard games. Denmark's spirit, brittle for so long, now felt electric. Each day without reprisals on the cell was a victory, a reminder that the Reich's invincibility had cracked. Still, grief shadowed every triumph. Eric, Anna, Klaus, Mikkel, Liv, and Jens bore the loss of friends who didn't return from earlier missions. The gold had turned the tide, but at a steep price. The SS executed suspected traitors, factories and schools endured surprise raids, and families lived with bags packed for sudden flight. The haunting knowledge remained. A single mistake could have doomed not just the cell, but entire towns. The forbidden hijack reshaped Denmark's resistance narrative. It proved that courage, planning, and split-second luck could defy even the Reich's harshest defenses. The outcome was neither absolute victory nor tragic defeat, but something more complex, more human. The forbidden plan showed that under occupation's dark weight, even ordinary hands could tilt the balance and turn despair into legend. For days, Denmark buzzed with stories of the impossible night. Shopkeepers adjusted their ledgers, quietly renaming products after heroic code words. Fishermen winked at strangers on the docks, passing secret nods that signaled allegiance. The Nazi gold train hijack wasn't just news. It was a living myth, stitched into the air by every nervous conversation and sidelong glance. Eric's cell, now scattered and disguised, watched this ripple from afar. Knowing that each small act of rebellion was fueled by gold the Reich would never reclaim. Across occupied towns, the mood shifted. Families, weary from years under the SS boot, dared to hope. The gold bars transformed from mere fortune into aid. Bribes for safe passage, funds for hiding Jews and refugees, medical kits for wounded fighters. Anna forged more passes than ever, her risky craft now supported by newfound resources. Klaus established fresh supply lines, stretching northward toward Sweden, constantly reinventing routes to evade German patrols. Mikkel's explosives funded new sabotage teams. Liv's coded lantern signals spread to distant villages, each flicker embodying defiance. But freedom came at a price. SS reprisals thundered through city blocks, arrests, beatings, and sudden midnight disappearances. The Nazis, humiliated by the gold's loss, poured resources into investigations, punishing anyone even suspected of resistance ties. Liv narrowly escaped capture in one sweep, rescued by a former shopkeeper who risked everything to hide her beneath stacks of grain. Jens, his nerves worn raw, took to sleeping in barns and cellars, always one step ahead of radio sweeps and informants seeking lenience. The gold's reach triggered debate among resistance leaders. How much could be spent safely? How would future missions be protected? Eric argued for careful dispersal, knowing that the larger the fortune, the greater the danger, as every hint of sudden wealth raised questions the Gestapo would never tire of asking. Still, the forbidden hijack gave Denmark's underground the edge it needed to survive, marking a pivot in occupied Europe's contest of willpower. British intelligence, in secret, celebrated the coup. RAF signals to Eric's cell grew warmer. Coded lists of supplies arrived with each new month, and the legend of the Danish gold train job became a teaching story among Allied agents. London radio hinted at Denmark's forgotten victory, spreading hope and curiosity even across distant shores, all while the Nazis searched in vain, their pride shattered and their resources depleted. For ordinary Danes, life was still brutal. Martial law bit down harder, Gestapo eyes watched every market stall, and factories suffered new work quotas. Yet the invisible victory of the gold train set a new tone. Resilience became routine. Resistance groups multiplied efforts, cutting train lines, sinking supply barges, blanketing towns in pamphlets that urged, "Hold fast." The Reich can bleed. Within the forbidden cell, survival became its own act of heroism. Anna changed her identity again, blending into a group of nurses caring for injured civilians. Klaus managed supply caches near abandoned farmhouses, mapping safe routes with coded chalk marks. Mikkel traveled as a railway repairman, ready to sabotage tracks or signal for help at a moment's notice. Liv's lantern signals were copied by others, her simple idea sparking hope across villages. Jens, tired but defiant, kept radio contact alive, promising London that Denmark was not yet lost. The cell's legacy grew even as their names faded. Other cells, inspired by the gold hijack, rushed to attempt daring raids. Some succeeded, some vanished. But each new strike was proof that Denmark's spirit, battered, haunted, desperately persistent, would never be fully extinguished. The outcome of that forbidden night rippled forward. It slowed Nazi efforts, bolstered Allied plans, and became the secret heart of Denmark's resistance. History would remember Denmark's occupation as a struggle of ordinary people defying overwhelming odds. The Nazi gold train job, shrouded in myth and coded in whispers, endured as a symbol, not simply of gold reclaimed, but of courage transformed into action. In the closing weeks of the war, as Nazi defeat loomed, even the coldest towns dared to hope. The forbidden cell's triumph proved that fate itself could be stolen from the hands of tyranny, one midnight raid at a time. As Denmark's long night drew toward its end, the forbidden cell's story echoed far beyond shattered rail yards and secret hideouts. The gold train hijack had upended Nazi confidence. The Reich scrambled to explain how disciplined SS patrols and armored convoys had been bested by 6 civilians armed with little more than willpower and nerves. In attics and cellars, families retold the tale. One midnight raid changed everything. The Germans never expected it. Erich, always the quiet force behind the group, slipped deeper into obscurity. His efforts, carefully planned diversions, coded signals, and split-second commands, became lessons passed to new resistance leaders. Anna redoubled her focus on forging identities, her hands stained with ink and fear as she gave refugees fresh names and new lives. Klaus continued mapping secret routes, teaching others how to skirt Nazi checkpoints, reminding them that patience and knowledge could defeat even the sharpest patrol. Mikkel trained younger fighters, using bits of scavenged gold to fund sabotage missions. Liv's lantern codes remained embedded in the hearts of schoolchildren who'd learned rebellion by candlelight. Jens stayed in the shadows, relaying only what was needed to keep the network alive. The occupation's final weeks were tense and tragic. SS reprisals grew ever more cruel. Collaborators vanished, suspicion poisoned friendships, and families lived by packed suitcases and vague goodbyes. Yet the forbidden cell's ghostly victory shifted the nation's mood. Denmark began to believe that one night could shape history, a faith found in the bakers, farmers, and railwaymen who chose courage in the face of certainty. Stories of gold bars resurfaced across Europe, igniting Allied imagination. In London, whispered accounts of Denmark's impossible mission fueled planning for future operations. Young resistance fighters in Norway and France looked to the Danes for inspiration, eager to test the Reich's limits in their own towns. Eric's cell, though deliberately erased from Gestapo records, made their mark through others' bravery. The forbidden hijack was evidence that no fortress is unbreakable, no tyranny permanent. For Eric's group, survival was bittersweet. They watched the occupation collapse, knowing the cost. Friends lost, families separated, old wounds refusing to heal. But their victory lived on in every meal shared from rationed stolen gold, every new pamphlet printed using Allied ink, every barn lantern flickered in code after curfew. Denmark's legend grew not in broad daylight but in shadows, the moments when ordinary souls changed fate. The forbidden plan served as a warning as well as hope. Success relied on silence, discipline, and the ability to disappear after triumph. Eric urged future leaders to avoid glory, to hold tight to secrets, to never risk all for fame. Anna's forged passes made escape possible for hundreds, but she insisted on gratitude, not celebration. Klaus saw the routes he mapped grow crowded and dangerous, and kept his instructions measured, wary of betrayal. Mikkel became known as a teacher, not a hero. Liv faded into the fabric of coastal life, letting others carry her signal forward. In those closing days, Danish resistance flourished behind a code, a knowledge that even when all seemed lost, a handful of determined people could write new history. The forbidden gold train job was already legend, etched into the memory of every dark night, every rushed escape, every secret gathering. Jens's signals, Anna's papers, Klaus's maps, Mikkel's explosives, Liv's courage, and Eric's silent resolve became echoes in generations to come. Victory, Denmark learned, didn't mean fanfare or parade. Sometimes it meant surviving with your soul intact, holding on to a story powerful enough to outlast occupation. The Forbidden Cell's closing act was to vanish, trusting that their mission's spark had kindled something enduring, something that, no matter Nazi retaliation, could never again be erased. May 1945 arrived like the first breath after drowning. Across Denmark, German forces faltered and surrendered. Occupation banners were torn down, and for the first time in 5 years, Danish voices filled the streets again, singing songs silenced since 1940. In hidden barns and candlelit rooms, members of the resistance emerged, tired, gaunt, yet unbroken. And within that rising dawn, whispers of the Forbidden Cell resurfaced, carried by those who still remembered the night the gold train vanished. The forbidden hijack had vanished from Gestapo files. No formal record survived, no names, no confessions, no photographs. The Nazis had erased everything they couldn't explain, but the story endured where paper could not. In memories, in coded graffiti painted on walls after liberation, in anonymous letters thanking the 6 who defied the Reich. The gold never reappeared. Some said it was hidden in fields near Kværndrup. Others claimed it helped finance secret post-war aid networks. Its exact fate didn't matter. The truth was in what it represented, courage measured not in wealth but in defiance. Eric never sought recognition. After liberation, he disappeared into rural life, taking work as a railway foreman under a false name. Those who knew him said he never spoke of that night, but often paused at passing trains, lost in thought. Anna joined a humanitarian mission, supplying food to displaced families. Her forged papers saved hundreds after the war, yet she declined every medal offered. Klaus moved north, helping rebuild rail lines that his sabotage had once crippled, ensuring Denmark's recovery rested on freedom, not fear. Mikkel opened a small workshop, his mechanical precision now aiding reconstruction instead of sabotage. Liv settled near the coast, her lantern code preserved in resistance archives, a symbol of silent bravery. Jens remained the phantom voice on the airwaves, volunteering with communication teams when Allied command requested Denmark's post-war reports. Their victory was never sung in parades, but Denmark's freedom echoed their name in whispers. Children of the resistance learned their story piecemeal, teachers recounting the 6 who robbed the Reich of its arrogance. Though no one confirmed their identities, the myth became a cornerstone of national pride. Historians would later document fragments, train logs showing unexplained halts, coded RAF messages intercepted near Kværndrup, missing gold from Reich accounting ledgers, but the faces behind them stayed hidden, as the group had intended. The moral weight of their act lingered. Some questioned whether stealing gold was justice or vengeance. Others argued that desperation makes morality bend. What none could deny was the courage it took to act while others waited. Eric's forbidden cell had tested the limits of fear and found something greater than resistance. It found humanity's refusal to surrender its soul. By the late 1940s, Denmark rebuilt from ruin, quiet streets repairing their scars. The story of the forbidden hijack became legend, part truth, part myth, entirely spirit. In Copenhagen's museums decades later, a rail coupling, bent and blackened from explosion, would stand as a silent exhibit with an unmarked plaque reading, "Denmark's Defiance." March 1945. No names, no claims. Only legacy. For future generations, the gold train remained more than stolen treasure. It became a metaphor, a reminder that victory is sometimes forged in silence, that freedom often owes its breath to people history never names. The forbidden cell faded into ghosts, their triumph buried beneath decades, yet their story lived wherever courage was needed most. As Europe healed, war threatened to dissolve into the blur of memory. Yet in Denmark, every time a train whistle cut through evening fog, listeners remembered that frozen night, when 6 citizens, unnamed and unarmed, challenged tyranny and won. Theirs was not merely a heist, it was the reclamation of hope itself, stolen back from the empire that thought it owned the world. The story of the forbidden gold train closed not with applause, but with silence, the kind earned only by those who do the impossible and walk away.